Right now, somewhere in the world, two people are falling in love, and they have absolutely no idea why. They will tell the story later. Our eyes met across the room. The timing was perfect, it just felt right. And all of that is true. And all of that is completely wrong. Because the real story of why those two specific people, out of 8 billion options, found each other, goes back not years, not decades, but hundreds of thousands of years, to a time when love, or something that functioned exactly like it, was the difference between survival and extinction. We tend to think of romantic love as a modern invention, or at least a medieval one, something that emerged with poetry and candlelit dinners and the invention of the greeting card. But the biology of attraction, the chemistry of attachment, the architecture of long-term bonding did not begin with Shakespeare. It began in the dark, around fires, in a world that was trying to kill you, and understanding where it came from will change the way you understand every relationship you have ever had. Let's start with a fact that most people find genuinely surprising. Ancient humans did not choose partners freely, at all. The romantic notion of two individuals meeting, feeling something, and deciding to be together is almost entirely a product of the last few hundred years of history. For the vast majority of human existence, mating was not a choice, it was a negotiation between families, between groups, between communities, because in a world without hospitals, without police, without any of the infrastructure that makes individual survival possible, the group was everything. You needed the group to hunt. You needed the group to defend territory. You needed the group to help raise children. And so the group had a direct interest in who paired with whom. And that interest was not romantic. It was strategic. Anthropologist Helen Fisher at Rutgers University has spent over 40 years studying the neuroscience of romantic love. She has identified 3 distinct biological systems that govern human mating, and they operate largely independently of each other. The first is lust, driven by testosterone and estrogen, a basic drive for sexual gratification that exists across virtually all mammalian species. The second is attraction, the focused, obsessive, almost manic state of early romantic love, driven by dopamine and norepinephrine, the same neurochemical system that underlies addiction. The third is attachment, the deep calm bond that forms between long-term partners, driven by oxytocin and vasopressin, the same hormones that bind parents to children. And here is what makes this extraordinary. These 3 systems did not evolve together. They evolved separately, for different purposes, at different points in evolutionary history. Lust evolved to motivate reproduction. Attraction evolved to focus mating energy on a specific individual, conserving the enormous resources required by sustained courtship. Attachment evolved to keep 2 people together long enough to raise offspring past the point of maximum vulnerability, which in early humans was years, not months, years, because a human infant is the most helpless newborn of any primate on Earth. And raising one successfully, in an environment full of predators, with no formula, no hospitals, no safety net of any kind, required 2 committed adults working together for a very long time. Love, in other words, was not a luxury. It was an engineering solution to a survival problem. But how did it actually work? How did 2 people in a world without language as we know it, without culture as we know it, without any of the social scripts that govern modern courtship, actually choose each other? The evidence suggests it looked both familiar and completely alien. Research on modern hunter-gatherer societies, the closest living analog to ancient human social structures, shows that early courtship almost certainly centered on what anthropologists call display behaviors. The same behaviors observed in virtually every social species on Earth: dancing in the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the most studied hunter-gatherer groups on the planet. Communal dancing is one of the primary contexts in which young men and women assess potential partners. And this is not coincidental. Dance is extraordinarily difficult to fake. Rhythm, coordination, stamina, responsiveness to a partner. All of these reveal genuine information about the nervous system, the physical condition, the social attunement of the dancer. A man who dances well is demonstrating, without words, that his brain and body work at a high level. A woman who dances well is demonstrating the same. Dance was the resume, and the audition, and the interview, all at once, around a fire, in the dark, with the full social attention of the entire group, which was also the audience, and the judging panel, and the enforcer of any boundaries that needed enforcing. But display behaviors were only the beginning, because what ancient humans were really doing, underneath the dancing and the laughter and the competition, was assessing resources. And this is where the picture becomes genuinely complicated and genuinely interesting, because the resources that mattered in a world without money, without property, without any of the material markers of status that govern modern attraction, were completely different from what we might expect. They were not wealth. They were not beauty in the modern sense. They were competence. A man who was an extraordinary hunter, who could read the land, track prey, bring home food reliably, was the most attractive man in the group, not because anyone made a conscious calculation, but because over millions of years, the women who were drawn to competent hunters had better fed children, who survived at higher rates and passed on that preference, generation after generation, until it became as automatic as breathing. A woman who was skilled at gathering, at identifying edible plants, at processing food, at managing the social relationships that kept the group functioning, was the most attractive woman in the group. For exactly the same reason, her children had more food, more social support, more protection, and they survived. We are the descendants of the people who made those choices. Every preference you feel, every feature that catches your eye, every quality that makes someone seem right, was shaped by exactly this process over hundreds of thousands of years of some people surviving and some people not. Love is not random. It never was. And then there is the question of jealousy. Because jealousy, that specific, consuming, sometimes violent emotion, did not appear with civilization. It appears in every human culture ever studied, in hunter-gatherer societies, in agricultural societies, in industrial societies, across every continent, every language, every historical period, which tells us something important. It is not a cultural product, it is a biological one. Evolutionary psychologist David Buss at the University of Texas has spent decades studying jealousy across cultures, and what he found was striking. Men and women experience jealousy differently. Men show stronger physiological responses to sexual infidelity. Women show stronger responses to emotional infidelity. And this difference, which appears consistently across cultures that have had no contact with each other, maps almost perfectly onto the different reproductive risks faced by men and women. A man who is deceived about paternity, who invests years of resources in raising children that are not genetically his, has made one of the worst possible evolutionary mistakes. The jealousy response in men evolved, at least in part, to prevent exactly this. A woman who loses the emotional attention and resources of her partner, loses the protection and provision that her children need to survive. The jealousy response in women evolved, at least in part, to prevent exactly this. These responses were not designed. They were selected over millions of years in a world where the stakes were not hurt feelings, but survival itself. Now here is the part of this story that I find most extraordinary, because all of this, the display behaviors, the competence assessment, the neurochemistry of attachment, the evolution of jealousy, all of it assumes that ancient humans formed something like the bonds we would recognize as love, and the question of whether they actually did, whether they experienced something that felt like what we feel, is one that science has been slowly and carefully answering, and the answer is almost certainly yes. The neurological systems that produce romantic love in modern humans are among the oldest systems in the mammalian brain. They are not uniquely human. Variations of oxytocin bonding exist in prairie voles, in wolves, in elephants. The dopamine rush of early attraction appears in animals that separated from our evolutionary line tens of millions of years ago. What is uniquely human is the narrative we wrap around it, the poetry, the meaning, the stories we tell about why this person, out of all possible people, is the one. But underneath the narrative, the chemistry is ancient. The longing is ancient. The specific pain of losing someone you love is ancient. And the specific joy of finding them is older than language, older than fire, older than anything we would recognize as human civilization. It has been here from the very beginning, and it will outlast everything we build. So the next time you feel it, that specific pull toward another person, that inexplicable sense that this person matters, in a way that other people don't explain it away. Don't reduce it to chemistry. Don't call it just biology, because it is biology, but biology that has been refined over millions of years by every person who loved well and survived because of it, and every person who loved badly and didn't. You are the result of that process. Every preference you feel is a message from the past. Every bond you form is a continuation of something ancient. And the love you feel right now is the same love that kept people alive in the dark, around fires, in a world that was trying very hard to stop them. If this made love feel different, share it with someone you love, and I will see you in the next one.